The grandmother found massive footprints circling their cabin in fresh snow. She whispered that the Bigfoot had returned after 40 years, the same one her husband once saved. What the family didn't know, this time, it came back bleeding and desperate for help. The rental truck's headlights cut through falling snow as the Carter family pulled up to the cabin. It looked smaller than Mark remembered, weathered pine logs, a sagging porch, windows dark as closed eyes. "This is it?" his daughter Sophie asked from the back seat, disappointment thick in her voice. "Your great-grandfather built this place with his own hands," Evelyn said quietly from the passenger seat. Mark's mother rarely spoke about the cabin anymore, but she'd insisted they come this year. Practically begged. Mark killed the engine. Through the windshield, the forest pressed close on 3 sides, dense and silent. No neighbors for 15 miles. No cell signal. Just mountains, snow, and whatever lived in those trees. They unloaded in silence, breath fogging in the freezing air. Mark's son, 12-year-old Ben, kept glancing at the tree line like something might step out. Smart kid. Mark didn't like how the forest felt either, too still, too watchful. Inside, the cabin smelled like dust and old smoke. Mark got the generator running while Evelyn moved through the rooms touching things, the stone fireplace, the kitchen table, the windowsills, like she was saying hello to ghosts. "Mom, you okay?" Mark asked. She didn't answer. They went to bed early, exhausted from the drive. Mark lay awake listening to wine scratch at the windows and his mother pacing downstairs. Finally, sleep pulled him under. He woke to screaming. Sophie stood at the window, pale as paper. "Dad! Dad!" Mark stumbled over, and his stomach dropped. Footprints circled the cabin. Not animal prints. Not human either. Each track was massive, 18 inches long, 5 toes clearly visible, pressed deep into fresh snow. They came from the forest, circled the entire cabin twice, then disappeared back into the trees. The stride between prints was impossibly long. 7 feet, maybe 8. "What is that?" Ben whispered, pressing against Mark's side. Mark's mind raced through explanations. A prank. Had to be. Someone from town with fake feet, trying to scare tourists. Except they were 40 miles from town, and nobody knew they were here. "It's nothing," Mark said, not believing it himself. "It's him," Evelyn said from the doorway. Mark spun. His mother stood perfectly still, both hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Mom? He's back," she whispered. "After all these years. He's back." "Who's back?" Sophie demanded. Evelyn walked to the window and placed one trembling hand against the glass, staring at the tracks. "Every winter for 40 years, she said softly. "Every single December, he returns. I'd hoped, maybe he'd finally stopped. Maybe he'd found peace. But he's here." The cabin felt suddenly smaller. Colder. "Someone's been coming here for 40 years? Mark asked carefully, the way you talk to someone standing on a ledge. "Not someone," Evelyn turned, and Mark saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Fear, yes. But also recognition. Grief. Something. Ben grabbed Sophie's hand. "I didn't want to believe it either," Evelyn continued, moving toward them. "When your grandfather first told me, I thought he'd lost his mind. Spending too much time alone in these mountains. But then I saw the tracks myself. Saw him." "Saw what?" Mark's voice came out harder than he meant. Evelyn looked at each of them, her son, her grandchildren, weighing something heavy. Finally, she crossed to the old oak cabinet in the corner and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it slowly. It was a carving, maybe 10 inches tall, carved from dark wood gone smooth with age. At first glance it looked like a bear standing upright. But the proportions were wrong. The arms too long. The face too flat. And the eyes, Mark's breath caught, the eyes were carved with an expression that was undeniably, terrifyingly human. "Your grandfather made this?" Mark asked. "No," Evelyn held the carving like it might break. "He received it. Left on the porch one morning after a snowstorm. No tracks leading to it, no tracks leading away. Just this, sitting on the railing, still warm." Sophie reached out but didn't quite touch it. "From who?" Evelyn's hands tightened. "From whatever leaves those prints in the snow. From whatever has been watching this cabin since before you were born. From the creature that saved your grandfather's life, and watched him die, and stayed with his body through the worst storm these mountains have ever seen so I could find him and say goodbye." The words hung in the air like smoke. "That's not possible," Mark said, but his voice had no strength. "I know what I saw," Evelyn said quietly. "And I know what your grandfather told me before he died. There's something in these mountains. Something old and alone. And for reasons I've never understood, it keeps coming back here. To us." Ben's voice came out small. "Like Bigfoot?" "Don't fill their heads with," Mark started. "Yes," Evelyn interrupted, looking straight at her grandson. "Exactly like that. Because that's exactly what it is." Mark wanted to argue. Wanted to pack everyone into the truck and leave. But outside, new snow was already filling those massive tracks, erasing them like they'd never existed. And his mother stood there holding that impossible carving with its two human eyes, and Mark remembered being a boy, remembered his father whispering late at night about things in the forest, about debts owed and promises kept. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Mark asked. Evelyn looked at him with infinite sadness. "Because I was protecting you. Because I hoped you'd never have to know. Because some truths are too heavy to carry." She placed the carving carefully on the mantel. "But he's back now. After all these years of silence, he's returned. And that means something's changed." Through the window, the forest waited, dark and deep. Somewhere out there, something walked on two legs that shouldn't exist. Something that remembered. Something that returned, year after year, for 40 winters. And now, Mark thought, looking at his terrified children, now it was their turn to understand why. Mark didn't sleep the rest of that night. He sat by the window with his grandfather's old hunting rifle across his lap, watching the tree line. Nothing moved. Nothing came. By dawn, the tracks were completely buried under fresh snow. "I need supplies," Mark announced at breakfast. "We're low on firewood. Canned food. Batteries." "I'll come with you," Sophie said immediately. "No. You stay with your grandmother and Ben. Lock the doors. Don't go outside." Evelyn said nothing, just stirred her coffee in slow circles. The drive into town took 90 minutes on icy mountain roads. Mark's hands ached from gripping the wheel, but it felt good to move, to do something normal. By the time he pulled into Cedar Ridge, he'd almost convinced himself the tracks had been some kind of elaborate hoax. Almost. Cedar Ridge barely qualified as a town, a general store, a gas station, a diner called Millie's, and maybe 30 houses scattered between the trees. Mark parked outside Hannigan's general store and stepped into air that smelled like pine smoke and diesel. Inside, the store was warm and cluttered. An old man behind the counter looked up as the bell chimed. "Help you?" he asked. "Just need some supplies. Firewood if you have it. You staying up at one of the cabins?" Something in the man's tone made Mark pause. "The old Carter place." "Why?" The man's expression shifted. "That right. Didn't know anyone still went up there. My mother's place. We come every few years." "Huh." The man turned away, started gathering items. "Might want to make this trip a short one." Mark grabbed canned goods, batteries, matches. At the counter, 3 locals hunched over coffee went quiet when he approached. They watched him with the careful stillness of people deciding whether to speak. "Something I should know?" Mark asked. The youngest one, maybe 50 with a gray beard, leaned back. "Depends. You see anything unusual up there?" "Like what?" "Like tracks," the bearded man said. "Big ones." Mark's spine went rigid. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Dale Henderson saw something 3 nights ago," the old man behind the counter said quietly. "Moving through the trees during that storm. Said it was tall as a moose but walked on 2 legs. Said it had eyes that caught his flashlight like a deer's." "Dale drinks," one of the coffee drinkers muttered. "Dale's a damn good hunter," the bearded man shot back. "Been tracking these mountains 40 years. If he says he saw something, he saw something." Mark set money on the counter. "Probably just a bear." "Bears don't walk like men," the bearded man said. "And they don't leave tracks that make grown adults go pale," he leaned forward. "Whatever's up in those mountains, it's been there a long time. My daddy told me stories about it when I was a boy. Said it was best left alone. Said some things earned the right to be left in peace. And some things," a new voice said from the doorway, "need to be put down before they hurt someone." Mark turned. A man in expensive hunting gear filled the doorframe, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that had seen too much sun and carried too much pride. "Dale Henderson," the bearded man said quietly, like introducing a loaded gun. Henderson stepped inside, bringing cold air with him. "That your truck with Montana plates?" "Yes." "You staying at the Carter cabin?" Mark didn't answer. Henderson smiled without warmth. "Thought so. My grandfather knew your grandfather. They used to drink together before your family stopped coming around so much." He moved closer. "Did your mama ever tell you why her husband died up there?" "Hypothermia," Mark said. "Caught in a storm." "That's the official story." Henderson pulled off his gloves. "Unofficial story is he went looking for something he shouldn't have. Went tracking prints in the snow like a damn fool, got himself lost and frozen." His eyes hardened. "That thing killed him just as sure as if it had torn his throat out." "You don't know that." "I know it's dangerous. I know it's been spotted 6 times this month alone, getting bolder. I know people are scared." Henderson leaned against the counter. "I've got 12 men with rifles and thermal scopes. We're heading into those mountains tomorrow to put an end to 40 years of rumors and fear. You see anything, you hear anything, you call the ranger station. They'll radio me. You can't just hunt something because you're afraid of it." Henderson's smile vanished. "Watch me." He headed for the door, then paused. "Fair warning, you keep your family inside after dark. When we start tracking, anything moving in those trees is fair game." He left. The bell chimed behind him. Mark stood frozen, his mind racing. These men were going to hunt it. Going to kill it. And somehow, impossibly, he found himself wanting to stop them. He drove back in silence, supplies forgotten in the truck bed. At the cabin, he found Evelyn in the basement. She'd pulled out boxes Mark had never seen before, old photo albums, journals, letters tied with string. "Mom, what are you doing?" She looked up, and her eyes were red. "Remembering," she said. "Because if he's come back after all this time, there's a reason. And I need to remember everything." She held up a photograph, edges yellowed with age. It showed Mark's grandfather standing in snow, one arm raised, waving at someone outside the frame. And at the edge of the photo, barely visible between 2 pine trees, was a massive dark shape standing upright, one enormous hand raised in the same gesture. Waving back. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in 2 hours. Mark watched the thermometer outside the kitchen window fall steadily, 30 degrees, 25, 20. The sky turned the color of old bruises, and wind began screaming through the pines like something dying. "Storm's coming," Evelyn said unnecessarily. She stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself. "Bad one." The weather radio crackled to life, "Emergency alert for Flathead County. Blizzard conditions expected through midnight. Wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour. Residents should shelter in place." Static swallowed the rest. "How bad?" Sophie asked. "Bad enough," Mark said, checking their supplies. Firewood stacked. Generator fueled. Food and water for a week if needed. They'd be fine. They had to be fine. The storm hit at sunset like a physical blow. Snow came sideways, so thick Mark couldn't see the tree line anymore. Wind hammered the cabin, making the old logs groan and crack. The power died within minutes. Mark got the generator running, but it could only power the lights, not the heat. They huddled by the fireplace as temperature inside dropped. "Tell us about Grandpa," Ben said, pressing against Evelyn's side. She was quiet for a long time. "He was stubborn," she finally said. "Kind, but stubborn. When he believed something, nothing could shake him." Her voice went soft. "Even when that belief cost him everything." "What do you mean?" Sophie asked. But Evelyn just shook her head, staring into the flames. The wind grew worse. Mark checked the doors, the windows, made sure everything was sealed. Outside, the world had disappeared into white chaos. At midnight, something hit the porch. Not the wind. Not a branch. Something heavy. Something that made the entire cabin shake. They all froze. "Stay here," Mark whispered, grabbing the rifle. "Dad," Sophie started. "Stay here." He moved to the front door, hands trembling. Another impact, softer this time. Not a hit, more like something collapsing. Falling. Mark threw the deadbolt and yanked the door open. Wind screamed into the cabin, bringing snow and cold that stole his breath. He raised the rifle, squinting into the blizzard. At first, he saw nothing. Just white chaos and darkness. Then his eyes adjusted. Something lay collapsed on the porch, barely visible under accumulating snow. Something massive. Mark's finger found the trigger as he stepped forward, and his boot hit something wet. Blood. Dark and steaming in the cold, already freezing into the boards. The shape moved. Mark jumped back, rifle aimed, and finally saw it clearly. 7 feet long, maybe more. Covered in dark hair matted with ice and blood. Arms too long, shoulders too broad. Its chest heaved with labored breathing, each exhale rattling and desperate. And its face. Mark's breath stopped. It was a face. Not human, but close enough to make his stomach twist. Broad forehead, flat nose, eyes closed against the pain. Its shoulder was torn open, blood pulsing weakly from a wound that looked like. "Bullet hole," Mark whispered. "Henderson. Those hunters must have found it, shot it, and it ran. Ran here. To them." The creature's eyes opened. Mark almost pulled the trigger. Almost. But those eyes, dark and intelligent and filled with more pain than anything should be able to endure, locked onto his. Not with aggression. Not with threat. With recognition. "Dad?" Ben's voice came from behind him, small and terrified. Is that? Get back inside," Mark said, but he didn't move. Couldn't move. The creature made a sound. Low and rumbling, somewhere between a growl and a moan. Its hand, because it was a hand, fingers and thumb and palm, reached out, not toward Mark but toward the open door. Toward warmth. Toward help. Then its eyes rolled back and it went still. "Oh God," Evelyn breathed. She stood in the doorway, both hands pressed to her mouth, tears already streaming. "Oh God, he came back. After everything, he came back here. Mom, get inside." "He's dying," Evelyn said. "Can't you see? He's dying, and he came here because he knew. Because he remembered." "Remembered what?" "That we helped him before." Evelyn pushed past Mark, dropped to her knees beside the creature, and placed one small hand on its massive chest. "Your grandfather found him like this, 40 years ago. Shot by hunters, bleeding in the snow. He brought him inside, patched him up, saved his life." She looked up at Mark, eyes fierce. "This is why he kept coming back. This is the debt your grandfather created." Mark stared at the creature, at the Bigfoot, because that's what it was, undeniably real and dying on their porch. At his mother kneeling beside it like it was family. At his children watching with wide, frightened eyes. Every rational part of his brain screamed to leave it. Call the Rangers. Let Henderson finish what he started. But he looked at that hand still reaching toward warmth, at those two human eyes now closed, at the blood staining snow red, and something inside him broke open. "Help me get him inside," Mark heard himself say. Sophie stepped forward without hesitation. Then Ben. Then all of them, grabbing arms and legs and trying to drag something that weighed more than all of them combined. Together, as wind screamed and snow buried the world, the Carter family pulled a legend out of the storm and into their home. The creature's blood left a dark trail across the threshold. There was no going back now. They dragged him to the basement. It took everything they had. Mark's back screamed with each step down the narrow stairs. Sophie and Ben pushed from behind while Evelyn guided from the front, her small hand surprisingly strong. Finally, they got the creature onto the old rug near the furnace. It lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of its chest. Up close, in the weak light of the camping lantern, Mark could see details that made his hands shake. Scars. Dozens of them, crisscrossing the creature's arms and torso. Old wounds, healed over years. This thing had survived more than tonight. "We need to stop the bleeding," Evelyn said, already tearing sheets into strips. "Mom, we can't, we don't know what we're doing." "Then we learn." She pressed fabric against the bullet wound. Blood soaked through immediately. "Sophie, get me more sheets. Ben, find the first aid kit. Mark, boil water." "This is insane," Mark said, but he was already moving. They worked in tense silence. Evelyn cleaned the wound as best she could while Mark held the lantern steady. The bullet had gone through the shoulder, missing bone but tearing muscle. The creature didn't wake, didn't flinch. Just kept breathing those terrible, rattling breaths. "He'll die without real help," Sophie whispered. "He'll die with it too," Mark said. "If we call anyone, if we tell anyone. We could get money," Mark continued, the words tumbling out. "Real money. Enough to pay off the house, put you kids through college. There are universities, research facilities that would pay millions for." "For what?" Evelyn's voice cut like a blade. "For proof. For a body?" She looked at her son with something close to disgust. "So you can sell him like an animal?" "He is an animal, Mom." "No," Evelyn placed both hands on the creature's chest. "He's not. Your father learned that. I learned that. And if you had any sense, you'd learn it too." "What's that supposed to mean?" Evelyn stood, joints popping. 43 years ago, your father was lost in a blizzard. Hypothermia. Frostbite. Dying alone in the dark. He told me what happened during those hours. She pointed at the creature. This one found him. Carried him to a cave. Kept him warm with its own body heat. Brought him pine boughs to lie on, broke ice so he could drink. Stayed with him through the entire night even though every instinct must have screamed to run from a human. Mark said nothing. Your father lived because of him, Evelyn continued, voice breaking. Lived long enough for the storm to clear, for me to find him. And when I did, this creature was sitting beside him like a guardian. Didn't run. Didn't attack. Just looked at me with those eyes and then walked away into the forest. She wiped tears roughly. We owe him everything. Everything. That was Dad's debt, not ours. It's a family debt. Evelyn shouted. It's honor. It's basic human decency. We could die for this, Mark shot back. Henderson and his men are hunting this thing. If they find it here, if they think we're harboring it. Let them come. Mom. I said let them come. Evelyn's voice echoed off the basement walls. I won't betray him. I can't. If that makes me a fool, fine. But I won't be a coward. Sophie stepped between them. Stop it. Both of you. They turned to her. He came here for help, Sophie said quietly, looking at the creature. He was shot and bleeding and could have hidden anywhere in those mountains. But he came here. To us, she looked at her father. That means something, doesn't it? That he trusts us? It means he's desperate, Mark said. It means he remembers, Ben said softly. The 12-year-old knelt beside the creature, one small hand hovering above the matted fur. Grandma said he kept coming back every winter. For 40 years. That's longer than you've been alive, Dad. Longer than I can even imagine. He looked up. Why would he do that if we didn't matter to him? Mark felt something crack inside his chest. He looked at his mother, who'd spent 40 years keeping this secret. At his daughter, standing with her arms crossed and her jaw set. At his son, who somehow understood what Mark was struggling to accept. At this impossible creature that had crawled through a blizzard, bleeding and dying, to reach their door. If we do this, Mark said slowly, if we hide him, we're breaking the law. We're making enemies. We're risking everything. I know, Evelyn said. Henderson will come. He'll bring guns. I know. We could lose the cabin. Could lose more. I know, Mark. Evelyn's voice softened. But some things matter more than safety. Your father taught me that. He gave up everything to protect this creature once. I'm asking you to do the same. Mark looked at the creature again. At the scars that told stories of survival. At the hand that had reached for help. At the trust that had brought him here. All right, Mark whispered. We keep him safe. Evelyn closed her eyes, relief flooding her face. But if this goes wrong, Mark added, if anyone gets hurt. Then we face it together, Sophie said firmly. As a family. Outside, the storm howled. Somewhere in that storm, hunters with rifles were tracking blood trails. And in the basement, the Carter family made a choice that would change everything. The creature's breathing steadied, just slightly. He wasn't out of danger yet. But for the first time in hours, he wasn't alone. Dale Henderson found the blood trail at dawn. It started at a rocky outcrop 2 miles east of the Carter cabin, dark drops frozen into the snow, leading west through the pines. He knelt, touched one with his gloved finger, and smiled. Got you, he whispered. Behind him, 11 men waited with rifles and thermal scopes. Local hunters mostly, plus 2 brothers from Kalispell who'd driven 6 hours for the chance at fame. They'd been tracking the creature for 3 days, ever since Henderson spotted it near the frozen creek. Last night's storm should have erased everything. But the blood trail was too heavy, too consistent. Whatever he'd shot was badly wounded. And wounded animals made mistakes. Trail leads west, Henderson called back. Toward the old cabins. Carter Place is that direction, said Robert Hayes, the bearded man from the general store. They just got there this week. Henderson's smile widened. Then we'd better make sure they're safe. They moved through the forest in formation, rifles ready. The blood drops grew more frequent. Closer together. Whatever they were tracking was slowing down, weakening. Perfect. At the general store, word had already spread. Henderson's going after it, someone said. About damn time, another replied. But not everyone was celebrating. Old Mary Whitcomb, who'd lived in these mountains for 83 years, shook her head slowly. That creature's been here longer than any of us. Never hurt nobody who didn't hurt it first. It's a monster, Mary. It's a survivor, she shot back. And Henderson's the monster if he kills something just for the glory of it. But her words didn't matter. In the diner, at the gas station, in living rooms across Cedar Ridge, the same conversation played out. The creature was dangerous, unpredictable, better off dead. Henderson was doing them all a favor. By noon, the entire town knew he was closing in. At the cabin, Mark checked the creature every hour. The bleeding had stopped, but the shoulder looked bad, swollen and hot to the touch. Infection, probably. Without antibiotics, without proper medical care, it might not matter that they'd stopped the bleeding. How is he? Evelyn asked, descending the basement stairs with more blankets. Alive. Barely, Mark stood, every muscle aching. Mom, we can't keep this up. If he doesn't wake soon, if the infection spreads. He'll wake, Evelyn said with a certainty Mark didn't feel. Upstairs, Sophie stood at the window watching the forest. Ben sat at the kitchen table, drawing. He'd been drawing for hours, sketches of the creature, of its hands, of its face. Trying to understand what they'd brought into their home. See anything? Mark asked Sophie. Trees. Snow, she turned to him. Do you think they're really coming? Those hunters? I don't know. That Henderson guy seemed serious. Mark joined her at the window. But they don't know the creature's here. The storm covered the tracks. We're safe. Even as he said it, he didn't believe it. 3 miles away, Henderson stopped at a split pine tree. The blood trail went straight toward a clearing he recognized, the approach to the Carter property. They've got it, he said. What? Hayes stepped forward. The Carters? Trail leads right to their cabin. That family's harboring it, Henderson's voice hardened. Either they're stupid, or they're complicit. Maybe it just died on their property, Hayes suggested. Could be lying in the snow somewhere near the house. Or they brought it inside, Henderson checked his rifle. Either way, we're going in. If they interfere, they're accessories. Dale, you can't just. Watch me, Henderson started walking. That thing has terrorized these mountains long enough. It ends today. The men followed, but some exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't hunting anymore. This was something else. Back at the store, Mary Whitcomb picked up the phone with shaking hands. The ranger station's line rang 4 times before someone answered. There's going to be trouble, she said. Up at the Carter cabin. Henderson's going up there with a dozen armed men, and I don't think he plans on asking questions first. Ma'am, if there's a dangerous animal. The only dangerous animal is Dale Henderson, Mary interrupted. And if someone doesn't stop him, people are going to die. She hung up and stared out at the mountains. Too far away to help. Too old to make the drive. All she could do was pray the Carter family was smarter than Henderson gave them credit for. In the basement, the creature's eyes flickered open. Just for a moment. Just long enough to see Evelyn sitting beside him, holding a damp cloth to his forehead. Their eyes met, human and something else, and understanding passed between them. He remembered her. Even through the pain and fever, he remembered. His hand moved, just slightly, and Evelyn took it. I know, she whispered. I know you remember. I remember too. The creature's eyes closed again, but his breathing steadied. Upstairs, Mark saw movement in the trees. At first, he thought it was snow sliding off branches. Then he saw it again, a flash of orange hunting gear, there and gone. His blood went cold. They're here, he said. Sophie spun from the window. What? The hunters. They're in the forest, Mark's mind raced. They followed the blood. They know. What do we do? Ben asked, voice small. Mark looked at his family. At the basement door. At the rifles hanging on the wall that his grandfather had left behind. We protect him, he said. Whatever it takes. Outside, Dale Henderson emerged from the tree line, 12 armed men at his back. The standoff was about to begin. The creature woke fully an hour before the hunters arrived. Mark heard the movement from upstairs, a low groan, the scrape of something heavy shifting on concrete. He grabbed the rifle and descended the stairs slowly, heart hammering. The creature sat upright against the basement wall. Its eyes tracked Mark's every movement, alert and aware. Intelligent. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, man and legend, both terrified, both uncertain. Easy, Mark whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to calm. You're safe here. The creature's gaze moved past him to the stairs, to the family above. Its nostrils flared, taking in scents. Then it looked down at its bandaged shoulder, at the dried blood on its fur, and something like understanding crossed its face. It knew they'd helped it. Mom, Mark called up. He's awake. Evelyn came down immediately, Sophie and Ben close behind despite Mark's protests. The creature tensed as they approached, muscles coiling, but it didn't move. Didn't threaten. Just watched. Evelyn knelt slowly, keeping her movements small and deliberate. Hello, old friend, she said softly. It's been a long time. The creature studied her face. Then, with aching slowness, it reached into the matted fur of its chest and pulled something free. The wooden carving. Mark's breath caught. The same carving that had been sitting on their mantel upstairs, the bear with human eyes that his grandfather had received 40 years ago. The creature had carried it all this time. Kept it. It placed the carving in Evelyn's hands. She clutched it to her chest, tears streaming. You kept it. All these years, you kept it. The creature made a sound, low and resonant, somewhere between a rumble and a sigh. Not aggressive. Almost. Mournful. Why did you come back? Evelyn whispered. After so long, why now? It couldn't answer, not with words. But it looked at each of them in turn, Evelyn, then Mark, then the children, and Mark understood. It came back because this was the only place it had ever known kindness. Sophie stepped forward, slowly extending her hand. Can I? Sophie, Mark started. But the creature was already reaching out. Its massive hand dwarfed Sophie's, rough and scarred and impossibly gentle. It touched her palm with one finger, barely making contact, then pulled back. Testing. Learning. Trusting. Ben moved next, less hesitant. He pointed at the creature's wounded shoulder. Does it hurt? The creature looked at the wound, then back at Ben. It nodded. They all froze. Did it just? Sophie breathed. It understood him, Mark said, something cold sliding down his spine. It understood the question. The creature's eyes moved to Mark. There was no mistaking the intelligence there. This wasn't an animal. Maybe it never had been. A sudden sound from upstairs, footsteps on the porch. The creature's head snapped up, body going rigid. It tried to stand but its wounded leg buckled. Mark moved without thinking, catching its arm, helping it stay upright. They stood there together, man supporting legend, both knowing what those footsteps meant. The hunters had arrived. "Stay down here," Mark told his family. "All of you. Don't come up no matter what you hear." "Dad." "I mean it, Sophie." But before he could move, the creature did something that stopped him cold. It reached for Mark's hand. Mark's right hand, the one that had been gripping the porch railing earlier, the one with fingers blackened by early frostbite from their work in the storm. The creature held his hand gently, examined the damaged fingers with something that looked like concern. Then it tore a strip of fabric from one of the blankets they'd used. Carefully, with movements too precise to be accidental, it began wrapping Mark's frostbitten fingers. The basement went silent. "It's helping you," Ben whispered. The creature worked slowly, deliberately, its massive fingers surprisingly dexterous. When it finished, it looked at Mark as if to say, "See? I understand. I remember what kindness looks like." Mark's throat tightened. "Thank you." The creature placed one hand over its chest, right above its heart. A gesture of acknowledgement. Of gratitude. "Mom," Mark said without looking away from those ancient eyes, "tell me the truth. All of it. What really happened to Dad?" Evelyn's voice came out broken. "Your father found him dying in a blizzard, 43 years ago. Shot by hunters, just like now. He brought him to that cave, patched him up, saved his life. They spent 3 days there while the storm raged." She took a shuddering breath. 2 years later, your father got lost in another storm. Turned around, hypothermia setting in. And this one, this beautiful, impossible creature, found him. Stayed with him through the night. Kept him warm with his own body even though it could have run, should have run. But Dad still died. Yes, Evelyn's tears fell freely now. The cold was too deep. Too much damage. But this one stayed anyway. Stayed until I found them the next morning. Your father was gone, but he wasn't alone. And when I knelt beside his body, this creature placed his hand on my shoulder. Not threatening. Comforting, she looked at the creature with infinite tenderness. He was saying goodbye. Saying he was sorry. Saying he tried. The creature's eyes glistened in the lamplight. "That's why he keeps coming back," Sophie said, understanding flooding her face. "He's been watching over Grandma. Over all of us. Because Grandpa showed him kindness, and he's returning it." Footsteps crossed the porch above. Then a voice, loud and hard, "Carter. We know it's here. Send it out, or we're coming in." The creature looked toward the stairs, then back at the family. Making a choice. Mark climbed the stairs alone. He left the rifle behind. Somehow, bringing it felt like betraying everything that had just happened in the basement. He opened the front door to blinding white and a wall of armed men. Henderson stood at the front, rifle raised. Behind him, a dozen hunters formed a semicircle, their weapons trained on the cabin. Searchlights mounted on their shoulders cut through the afternoon gloom, turning the snow into a field of harsh shadows. "Where is it?" Henderson demanded. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The blood trail leads right to your porch, Carter. We've been tracking it for miles. That thing is here, and you're going to hand it over." Mark stepped onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind him. "There's nothing here but my family." "Then you won't mind if we search the premises." "I mind very much." "You're not coming in." Henderson's finger moved to his trigger. "That creature is dangerous. It's been terrorizing these mountains for decades. If you're hiding it, you're complicit in whatever it does next." "It hasn't done anything," Mark shot back. "You shot it. You hunted it. It was running for its life. It's a monster. It's a living thing that you tried to murder for sport." The hunters shifted, uneasy. Some lowered their weapons slightly. But Henderson's remained steady. "Last chance," Henderson said. "Bring it out, or we come in." Behind Mark, the door opened. His heart stopped. He turned, ready to shout at Sophie or Ben to get back inside. The creature stepped onto the porch. 7 feet of scarred, wounded legend, moving with a limp but standing tall. Blood had soaked through the bandages on its shoulder. Every step must have been agony. But it kept coming, kept moving, until it stood beside Mark. Then in front of him. The creature placed itself between the hunters and the cabin. Between the guns and Mark's family. A shield. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Henderson recovered first. "There it is. Shoot it." "Wait," Hayes shouted. "It's not attacking. It's protecting them," another hunter said, awe creeping into his voice. "Look at its stance. It's protecting the family." The creature stood perfectly still, arms slightly spread, making itself the largest possible target. Its eyes moved across the hunters, calculating, understanding exactly what they were. What they wanted. Henderson raised his rifle. "I don't care what it's doing. Fire." 3 shots rang out. All 3 hit the creature's chest. It staggered back 1 step, 2, Mark caught its arm, felt the massive weight of it, but it didn't fall. The creature looked down at the wounds, dark blood welling, then looked back up at Henderson. And roared. The sound split the world. It wasn't rage, wasn't attack, it was warning. A sound so deep and primal that it bypassed thought and struck directly at instinct. The searchlights shook in the hunter's hands. 2 men stumbled backward. Henderson fired again. The creature moved. Fast. Impossibly fast for something wounded and bleeding. It crossed the distance between porch and hunters in 3 massive strides. Henderson tried to swing his rifle, but the creature was already there, one hand closing around the barrel. Metal shrieked as the rifle bent. The creature tossed it aside like a toy and turned to the others. They opened fire. Bullets struck fur, muscle, flesh. The creature roared again and swept its arm in a wide arc. 3 hunters went flying, landing in snowdrifts 10 feet away. Their rifles clattered across ice. "Shoot it! Shoot it!" Henderson screamed, scrambling for his sidearm. But the creature wasn't killing them. Mark realized it with sudden clarity. The creature was destroying their weapons, knocking them down, scattering them, but every strike was controlled. Measured. It could have torn them apart. Could have crushed skulls and snapped necks. Instead, it was disarming them. It grabbed another rifle and broke it over its knee. Smashed a searchlight with one fist. Caught a hunter who tried to run and set him down in the snow, hard but alive. "It's not trying to kill us," Hayes shouted. "Stand down. Stand down." Some listened. Some lowered their weapons and backed away, hands raised. Others, including Henderson, kept firing. The creature took each bullet like a hammer blow but kept moving. It crushed a thermal scope under its foot. Ripped a rifle from another hunter's hands and threw it into the trees. Stood over Henderson, bleeding from a dozen wounds, and Henderson finally saw it. Saw the intelligence. The restraint. The choice being made. The creature could end him right now. Instead, it turned and walked back toward the cabin. Each step left blood in the snow. Its breathing came ragged and wet. But it kept walking, kept moving, until it stood on the porch again. Protecting the family one last time. Henderson lay in the snow, his expensive hunting gear torn, his pride shattered. Around him, his men regrouped, checking injuries, bruises, sprains, wounded egos, but nothing fatal. Nothing permanent. "It could have killed us," Hayes said quietly. "We shot it a dozen times and it could have killed every one of us." Henderson said nothing. The creature looked at Mark one last time. Blood dripped steadily from its wounds. Its legs shook with exhaustion. But in its eyes, Mark saw something that broke his heart. "Goodbye." "No," Mark whispered. "You can't go out there. You're hurt. You'll die." The creature placed one massive hand on Mark's shoulder. Squeezed gently. Then it turned toward the forest. Toward freedom, or death, or whatever waited in those trees. "Let him go," Evelyn said from the doorway, her voice thick with tears. "He's earned that much." The creature took one step off the porch. Then another. And the forest waited to take him home. The creature made it 3 steps before collapsing. Mark was moving before he thought, racing across the snow. Behind him, Evelyn screamed something, but the words didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the massive body crumpled in the white, blood spreading in a dark circle. "No, no, no," Mark whispered, dropping to his knees. "Stay with me. Just stay with me." The creature's eyes opened. Looked at him. Not afraid. Just tired. So terribly tired. Sophie and Ben reached them, then Evelyn. The family circled the creature as snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, covering everything. "We have to get him inside," Sophie said desperately. "He's too weak," Mark said. "He's..." The creature's hand moved. Reached into its chest fur one final time and pulled something free. Its fingers trembled with effort as it held the object out to Evelyn. A locket. Silver, tarnished with age, on a broken chain. Evelyn took it with shaking hands. "What?" She opened it. Inside was a photograph, faded and cracked but still visible. It showed a man standing in snow, smiling at the camera. Beside him, one arm around the man's shoulders in an unmistakable gesture of friendship, stood the creature. Younger then. Less scarred. But unmistakably him. And the man was Evelyn's husband. "Oh God," Evelyn breathed. "Thomas. My Thomas." The photo told a story the family had never known. Not just rescue, not just kindness, but genuine friendship. The creature and Thomas standing together like brothers. Like equals. Like family. "He loved you," Evelyn whispered to the creature, tears falling onto the locket. "He talked about you sometimes, late at night when he thought I was sleeping. Called you his friend. His impossible, beautiful friend. I thought it was just stories. I didn't know, I didn't understand." The creature's breathing grew shallower. Mark looked back toward the hunters. They hadn't moved, still scattered across the clearing, watching. Henderson sat in the snow, staring at his hands like he couldn't recognize them. "Help us!" Mark shouted at them. "You did this. You help us fix it." No one moved. "Please," Ben added, his young voice cracking. "He didn't hurt you. He could have killed all of you and he didn't. Please." Hayes stepped forward first. Then another hunter. Then 3 more. They approached slowly, weapons left behind, and knelt in the snow around the creature. "I know a vet," Hayes said quietly. 20 miles from here. She's treated bears, mountain lions. Maybe." "There's no time," Mark said. The blood wasn't stopping. The creature's chest barely rose. The creature's hand found Evelyn's. Squeezed once. "Don't you dare," Evelyn said fiercely. "Don't you dare leave me again. I already lost Thomas. I can't, I won't." But the creature's eyes said what words couldn't. This wasn't goodbye because it wanted to leave. This was goodbye because it had no choice. Its other hand moved to its chest, over its heart, then reached out and touched each of them in turn. Mark. Sophie. Ben. Evelyn last. Thank you, the gesture said. For everything. Wait, Sophie said suddenly. The locket. Where did you get this photo? The creature's lips pulled back, not a snarl, but something that might have been a smile. Its hand moved in a gesture toward the cabin, toward the mountains, toward time itself. Thomas gave it to him, Evelyn realized. Gave him this locket so he'd remember. So he'd always have a piece of us, her voice broke. And he kept it. For 40 years, through everything, he kept it. The sun broke through the clouds, just for a moment. Golden light spilled across the snow, turning everything bright and clean. The creature turned its face toward the warmth, eyes closing. Its breathing stopped. Then started again, shallow but steady. He's still alive, Hayes said, pressing fingers to the creature's neck. Pulse is weak but it's there. Then we don't give up, Mark said. We get him to that vet. We save him. He won't fit in any of our trucks, someone pointed out. Then we make multiple trips. We do whatever it takes. Mark looked at Henderson, still sitting in the snow. You help, or you get the hell out of here. Henderson stood slowly. For a long moment, Mark thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd turn and walk away. Instead, Henderson picked up a blanket from one of the fallen packs. I've got rope in my truck, he said quietly. We can make a stretcher. It took an hour to rig something strong enough. Another hour to move the creature carefully onto it. The whole time, the family stayed close, speaking softly, keeping him calm. The hunters worked in silence, faces grim with shame. As they prepared to carry him to the trucks, Evelyn placed the locket back in the creature's hand. You hold on to this, she said. Thomas wanted you to have it. Wanted you to know you were never alone. The creature's fingers closed around the locket. They carried him toward help, toward hope, toward whatever came next. Behind them, the cabin stood silent in the snow, guardian to a secret 40 years old. Mark looked back once and saw it clearly, not just a building, but a sanctuary. A place where legend and humanity met. Where friendship crossed impossible boundaries. Where a creature and a man had proven that family wasn't about blood. It was about choice. About loyalty. About showing up, year after year, to protect the people you loved. He wasn't a monster, Sophie said, walking beside her father. Mark pulled her close. No. He was family. And somewhere in those mountains, the wind carried their promise forward. The creature would survive this. They'd make sure of it. Because some debts could never be fully repaid. Only honored.